I'm Jim Monaghan from Professional Baseball Instruction and the Baseball Health Network with PJ Cerreto and Artie Lewicki. And today we're going to talk about some of the mental aspects of coming back from Tommy John surgery, the rehabilitation process, and see where they are today moving forward in their career. Now, PJ, you've had 2 TJ surgeries, right?
That's correct.
When was the first one?
My first surgery was in June of 2013.
And the second one?
August of 2014. They were 14 months apart.
And Artie, when was your surgery? You've had 2 operations, but only 1 Tommy John, right?
Yes, I had a bone spur taken out in 2009, and then I had Tommy John in August 2012.
Now, was there one specific injury that you can point to for the first time? Was it something you felt in your arm at a moment, or do you know if it was building up?
I've never had any issues before this injury, and I felt it on one pitch. I knew something was wrong. And yeah, it was torn after that one pitch that I felt the tear.
Now, Artie, with a bone spur, I know that's a little different. I've actually had one in my shoulder. That's a little different from needing Tommy John surgery. What happened leading up to that?
I think it was just the bone spur happened just from overuse, but my doctor, Cerreto, said that over time the bone spur pushes the bones apart. So you take the spur out, the ligament gets stretched, so that don't be surprised if in 2 or 3 years the ligament just goes because it's loose. And sure enough, that's what happened.
And PJ, when you had the first surgery, what was the recovery process like? How much did you know about it first?
I didn't know much about it to start off. I learned obviously as I went along, and it was difficult, but I just had a positive outlook because I did get drafted right at 5 days after the surgery, which gave me something positive to look forward to. It was hard though, the process.
Yeah, now you mentioned that. That's kind of odd that you would have surgery and still, you must have been impressive up to that point for the Cincinnati Reds to go and say, we're still going to take a chance on this kid even though we know he's had Tommy John surgery. That probably speaks to a couple of things. 1, the talent that you had. 2, the work ethic probably that they saw in you up to that point. And 3, if you look at the rate of recovery from Tommy John surgeries that guys are having now. I mean, years ago, this was career ending. Now, I don't want to say it's a blip on the radar, but it is a lot different now than it was as recently as 5, maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's such a common thing now. Even in the organization right now, there's guys every month probably getting the surgery. It's just so common.
Now, Artie, you had your surgery in 2012, your Tommy John surgery, and got drafted this past year. Did that factor, the surgery factor at all into the Detroit Tigers' decision, do you think?
No, I know that it was actually something that they weren't deterred by because they've taken kids in earlier rounds with the same elbow problem. So, like you said, it's so common and it's so, I wouldn't say it's routine, but the success is so high for the return rate that it's not really something that concern them when they're making selections.
And of course, you've worked with Dr. Chris Ahmad and Dr. Andrews, James Andrews, one of the top orthopedic surgeons in the country who did your Tommy John surgery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that also made it a lot easier knowing that you had probably the best guy in the world at the time doing the surgery. And there was another kid on my team who went down within 4 months later, or 4 months earlier actually. So for me, it was kind of, I always had someone to check back to of how are you feeling today? I'm 2 months out, did you feel this? And 2 months out, I'm 3 months out, did you feel this? And this, having that guy to go back and saying, yeah, man, it's right on track. And then seeing where he was at to know that, okay, he had this, I have this, and he's still throwing, he feels fine. So it was overall very supportive.
Now, Artie, prior to your Tommy John surgery, how hard were you able to throw?
I was throwing anywhere from the low 90s to being able to get up to around 94, maybe 95.
So if you're sitting low 90s and topping out at 95, how frustrating is it to go from being able to do that to now having to basically start over where you have difficulty throwing 45 feet?
It's definitely difficult. It was more of an adjustment period. You try to focus on the day, you try to win the day, you try to take whatever your task is in front of you and focus on that, because if you just rehash the past and you focus on where you were or where you want to be, you're not going to be able to perform where you're at the best of your ability.
And PJ, staying with this mental aspect of it, you pitch well in high school, you pitch well in college, well enough certainly to get drafted. Now you've got this arm injury. You've got to drive to get to where you were. How much did you have to dial yourself back while you were going through that first rehabilitation process?
That's definitely something you have to learn along the way. You're right about that. You always focus on working hard, but you have to let yourself back a little bit, and every day, there's ups and downs along the way. You have to let your arm hurts, you have to dial it back a little. It's tough.
Artie, when you had the bone spur, how much rehabilitation process was there for that?
About 6 to 8 weeks. I was pitching again, you know, no less than 2.5 months after.
Was there a process though where you had to step back a little bit before you went forward, or could you pretty much immediately get right back to where you had been in terms of your training?
No, I had to wait about 4 weeks, but it was like anything. I mean, if you feel good that day, then you're gonna work hard and you're gonna go out and you're gonna do your work. But if you gotta listen to your body, so if you have a day where you're sore, you gotta take a step back and shut it down. And then when you have 2 good days in a row, you want to take advantage of those days.
Now, the rehabilitation process for Tommy John surgery is roughly a year.
Yes.
And so you come back after the first surgery and you're pitching. What happened that led to having the necessity of a second Tommy John operation?
Well, I came back at about 9 months throwing full speed, and it was my first time in pro ball. I wanted to go out there 100%. I might have pushed myself a little too hard. It was 9 months. I mean, maybe should have waited a little longer, but something you can't look back at now. I felt the tear the second time. It was my second game in pro ball.
And when you go through that again, obviously the first thought in your mind is, you've got to be kidding me, or something like that. Probably something we can't say on camera. But what led you to say, all right, I'm going to have the surgery again, and I'm going to come back and go through the rehabilitation process? Did you ever doubt that you would do that?
It was something I thought about at first, because they say the second surgery is even a less percentage of you recovering 100%, but just an opportunity I can't pass up. I mean, I've loved baseball my whole life. I'm going to continue until I can't go anymore. I'm going to give it another shot. That's what I thought when I had the tear for the second time.
Now, Artie, after your operation, you were back in college, pitching in the College World Series. Was there a moment when you're on the mound, and obviously your adrenaline's pumping, and this is a situation where you really want to do well, was it ever in the back of your mind, I've had this surgery, I've got to be careful here, or were you able to just mentally let go and say, I'm healthy, my body can do this, here we go?
That was also another main obstacle I had to overcome, was that the mental aspect of, hey, just getting out there and letting it rip, and knowing at the back of your mind you got to focus on the next pitch, the batter, what, you know, the game situation, instead of thinking, oh my God, is my arm going to come off? Is this going to hold? But there were a couple times early in the season where I had those thoughts. Well, you know, is it going to hold up? Is it going to stay? But then, like you said, there were times where I could just go out there and pitch and start dealing and not have to worry about it, because I knew it was cemented in it.
And PJ, you're in the rehabilitation process from your second arm injury. How much mentally is going on with you right now as you struggle to come back from this?
Well, the positive thing about it being a second surgery, I learned a lot along the process of the first rehab, so I pretty much know everything that I have to do, and I'm just trying to be smarter with everything that I'm doing this time.
And how far into the rehab process are you now?
About 4 months. I'm still not throwing for another 3 or 4 months. They're really pushing everything back because it's a second surgery. It's a little more risky.
Artie, when were you able to start throwing in the rehabilitation process from your Tommy John surgery?
I started throwing approximately 16 weeks after my operation. Took me about a month to get my full range of motion back. And then I started playing catch progressively until about 6 months. I started throwing flat grounds. I didn't really get on a mound until about seven months, and I was throwing simulated batters around eight months.
And PJ, after your first surgery, were you back to 100%? Were you throwing as hard as you had been?
Yeah. During college, I was in the low 90s to getting up to 95, and my first game back in pro ball, about 9 months after the surgery, I was throwing 94, so I was pretty much right there.
We've mentioned velocity a few times here in speaking with Artie and with PJ, and there's a common perception that Tommy John surgery, you have it, you throw harder. In your experience, is that accurate?
I got back to probably about the same to where I was, but it wasn't because of the Tommy John surgery. It was because of the rehab that followed the Tommy John surgery. It was because I had 8 months of sitting, on my butt and just watching film and learning hitters' approaches and then working out. All that combined with the physical strength, I was able to get back to where I was, but it wasn't because of the surgery. It was because everything that followed the surgery.
And PJ, how about you? Same experience?
Yeah, I pretty much got back to where I was. I was at 95 in college, and after the surgery I got to 94. It was definitely because of a lot of shoulder work that I did get my velocity back. I wouldn't say it's because of the surgery.
Now, you're both playing professional baseball, Artie with the Tigers and PJ is with the Cincinnati Reds organizations. How much of a difference have you seen in the advancements in team medicine in the short time that you've been playing pro ball?
I've seen a couple different things. I've kind of been able to take bits and pieces from everybody's rehab, like Dr. Ahmad's rehab, Dr. Andrews, Virginia, and now the Tigers. And everyone has their own little spin on things, but it's all the same message. It's all preventative care, and it's all after throwing care. It's all prehab and rehab for the guys that are hurt. It's all, you know, the shoulder stuff, the forearm stuff, the leg stuff, the core stuff, the whole package in order to keep your whole body healthy, not just your arm.
And PJ, how about you in dealing with the Cincinnati Reds?
Yeah, I agree with Artie there. A lot of the majority of the stuff we do is prehab, I would say, to prevent yourself from injury. That's a lot of what we do.
Artie, if you had one word of advice for a young pitcher so that he might avoid the need for Tommy John surgery, what would it be?
Prehab, to avoid it, to take care of your body preemptively so that you don't have to go through this whole rehab process and the whole strength and conditioning after you got hurt. You should do it before you got hurt, because not only is it going to help your pitching, but it's going to help keep you healthy.
And PJ, as a veteran now of 2 Tommy John surgeries, for a young pitcher who's going through this, the TJ surgery and the rehab, what advice would you give them?
Just to be smart. Don't push yourself too hard. I mean, that's probably why I'm in this situation of having 2 surgeries. You got to be smart, trust the process, and you got to be with a smart coach to lead you along the way.
Artie Lewicki, PJ Cerreto, I'm Jim Monaghan. For more information, visit baseballhealthnetwork.com.